1,000 seasons and never give up on its reasons. This new day calls our name. Light up the day with love. We'll find a way as one. Across the world our lives unfold. We're here together. Every moment now, a song to sing. Who will you be? Don't give up this fire. Starts today. This time. Thousand seasons and never give up on its reasons. This new day calls your name. Light up the day with love. We'll find a way as one. Across the world our lives unfold. We're here together. Every moment now, a song to sing out loud. Every road we find, we climb. We are seasons and never give up on its reasons. This new day calls our name. Light up the day with love. We'll find a way as one. Across the world our lives unfold. We're here together. seasons and never give up all its reasons. This new day calls your name. Light up the day with love. We'll find a way as one. Across the world our lives unfold. We're here together. Every moment now, a song to sing out loud. Every road we find we climb. We are
need to be on. Hello, everybody. I'm a little early. It's just that I wanted to chat to all of you about convention. I don't know if you've been or if you watched it at home. I watched it with the team and we had so much fun, and it really felt like it's very different from previous years. I feel like we're back, right? Because we have Ben Riley. I love Ben. And I always felt like Ben belonged in Young Living, and it's indeed very true. And we now have like, ooh, that was the alarm. And we now have like H.K. Lin, Dr. H.K. Lin. He loved Gary, and he is carrying Gary's frankincense research and all the things that Gary has been doing with him. And then we have Dr. Dan Purser, right? I don't know if you know who he is. He's the one who developed PPP, and he's like all things natural regarding hormones. So he's a great guy. And then you've probably met Dr. Cole Woolley at the farm. Did you guys see him? Because he said he was going to be there, but I haven't actually seen he did any live, or I haven't seen him show up in any of my photos. So I'm not sure if he was there. And today we're going to be talking about frankincense. That's why I brought up Dr. Cole Woolley, because he was one of those who, Janie, did you see Cole at the Frankincense, the Farm Expo? Was he there? Because he said he was going to be there to tell everybody about how he went to Oman for Gary and with him in the beginning to set up the distillery for Gary. And he also on his wall has been sharing the story of sacred frankincense and how when he first went to Oman, he had to sleep on the floor. I remember it was very interesting. It was really interesting to watch what he said. So, and then there are all these people, right? They brought back Lindy Smith for marketing. Lindy has been with Young Living for 20 years. It's amazing. It's just so good. And I heard there were only 6,000 people going in person. And I think if we can do this virtually, I'm sorry, Janie, you sprained your ankle. Put a lot of lemongrass and frankincense on it. I'm sure it'll be fine very soon. So yeah, well, let's start with the story of frankincense. Okay, let me see. Let me share screen. I am certainly hoping that I can do this well. This is the sixth lesson, and I'm still sort of learning along the way, struggling to make sure that everything works well. Okay. All right, you can all see, right? I probably have to put my glasses on because I'm going to be reading out of the presentation today because I quoted a lot of the things that was printed in the D. Gary Young blog. Unfortunately, the blog is quite difficult to find, but because I've read the information, so I know it's there, so I can find it and share it with y'all. I hope you don't mind me just reading out from the blog. And I always felt that even if we know the information, is always good to read it again or watch it again or hear it from another person because everybody has a different perspective. So all the information that I will be sharing today will be based on the Gary Young blog and this book, obviously. This book that can't see this book that I always talk about, the Seed to Seal book. You can buy this book in your virtual office. And I urge everybody who has Young Living at home to buy a copy because you can always refer to it. It's crazy. It's like the journey of Gary, right? It's sort of like the hard copy version of this course. Of course, I've thrown in more information for this course because I have my own experience with him, and I add in other information. So it's really fun to read. And other than this Seed to Seal book, and then I base it on the D. Gary Young blog that Gary wrote, and then also on this book, The One Gift. Okay, The One Gift, this book. And I don't know if you can still buy it. I think you have to find it on Amazon. Because LSP don't sell it anymore. But this is a book that I actually read it after when I was doing this course, when I was writing up this course just so last year. And I felt like I knew Gary even more. And because a person who can write something like this, you definitely know their heart, and really, it's really, really deep, and you can really see what kind of person Gary was, the core and the integrity. And then also on this book, Shutron, this book. Okay, I'm going to put it here, then you can see it, right? So this Shutron book is just a little book that talk about different herbal plants, different aromatic plants, and what they can do. It's called Shutron's Ancient Apothecary. Okay, so it's very interesting. And it's also the oils that he talked about and Shutron was using when he was in this book. Okay, so I urge all of you to read it. Actually, this is an autographed version. Oh my God, Gary. Okay, all right, so let's start. Okay. So I'm gonna be talking about frankincense. So this is the one where it goes back 5,000 years. Let's first talk about the essential oils in the ancient world. And I actually got this from the Young Living website. I can't tell you where I found it. I can't remember, but it's somewhere in the FAST library of the Young Living website. Okay, so let's see the essential oil timeline. I really like this timeline. And this timeline is actually also in the Young Living Museum in headquarters. If you have the ticket to virtual convention, you can click onto the tab on the top. There's museum videos, and Gary will walk you through each part of the museum. Okay, don't worry about it, Kimberly. I just started. You can feel free to write in the comments and tell me where you're from, because I can read it now. Hi, Kimberly from Ohio. It's okay. I just started. And so this timeline is actually put on the wall of the Young Living Museum. And it talks about, and it's merged in with the ancient essential oil, and then Gary's starting with the essential oils. So it actually started at 3,500 BC, which is 5,000 and 500 years ago. They trace back the history that they were already using a distillation apparatus, first known distillation apparatus developed in Tipi Gora, located in modern-day northwest Iraq. And so in the Middle East, they have already been distilling. In the beginning, they thought it was like a cooker. And then when they looked more into it, it's actually like a distillation apparatus. It's quite interesting. Gary actually went to, I'll show you the photos in a moment. Okay. Let me close this door. Is it quiet? Like you can't hear the background sound, right? Because my child is having her summer holiday already and she's watching TV. And then they dated back 3000 BC in China. And I'm Chinese. I live in Hong Kong. So Shen Rong, it's interesting. Well, the English translation is Shen Nong. Actually, it's Shen Rong. And we call him the father of herbal medication and herbal medicine. And he wrote a book. This is the book that he wrote. And he's actually an herbalist. He's not a ruler. He's actually an herbalist. And he have recorded over 300 botanicals and their medicinal uses. And we actually have a Chinese saying that we call it Shen Rong, try 1,000 herbs. Shen Rong, try 1,000 herbs. That's what we say in Chinese. And remember that video that I showed all of you last time when he was three times ago when he was in Ecuador, that he was in the Amazon jungle and he was talking about the leaves, how it like grows like this, and then he snipped off one of the leaves and chewed on it. That actually is exactly what Shen Rong did in China. Well, the legend goes, because this is like a 5,000-year-old story, right? But it's a legendary story. And it's the title of the story is actually called Shen Rong Try 1,000 Herbs. And the legend goes that Shen Rong actually died from trying one very toxic like poisonous herb, and that's how he died. And because Shen Rong have found that he can try out different herbs and not die, because there's always an antidote nearby, and that's what he studied. I felt like, if you believe in reincarnation, I felt like Gary was Shen Rong reincarnated, and Chinese people believe in reincarnation. So anyway, that's a story that it's a very interesting story. And then they found in the wall, what do you call it? Wall painting. I don't know what they call it in English. The wall manuscript, I don't know, dated in Egypt back 3,400 years ago. So Queen Hatshepsut, ruler of Egypt, undertook a legendary expedition to the land of Punt. The greatest of all the riches brought back by her army is the grove of a myrrh tree, right? And then back in 1,300 BC, King Tut was buried with an alabaster jars, which I'll be talking about, designed to hold the precious essential oils the boy king would need in the afterlife. And he was buried with it. So he was buried with all these precious artifacts, and many of them were the bottles that were still filled with aromatic oils, which was like a resin. I'll talk about it in a moment. And then Macedonia, I remember when I was back in school, Macedonia felt like a long time ago, but it's actually only 345 BC. Alexander the Great burned incense during his youth, even being berated by his tutor, Leonidas, for his extravagant use of incense. And in Israel, obviously the story we all know, frankincense, gold, and myrrh were brought to Jesus, the Christ child, as a gift. And recently at convention, Mary talked about how according to Gary's research in the Middle East and in Egypt and in Israel, all the historical papers that he has found, actually, the gold that was mentioned back then was balm of Gilead. Balm of Gilead is a liquid essential oil that is golden in color. So, thank you. Kimberly, it's cave painting. So it's the oil actually is golden in color. So it looks like liquid gold. And that's what they call it back in the days. They call it the balm of Gilead, the essential oil, liquid gold. And because the Bible was translated over thousands of years from different people, so there was a lot of belief that frankincense, gold, and myrrh, the gold actually was referring to balm of Gilead instead of gold, because the oils back then, the resin and the oil, were actually more precious than the gold that we know nowadays. Yeah, okay. And then 100 AD, which is not very long time ago, a Roman historian writes his Natural History, which describes use of herbs and essential oils. And 1000 AD, which is only about 1,000 years ago, the Persians, you're already using essential oils like rose essence and using steam distillation and setting the groundwork at aromatherapy. And obviously, modern essential oil was started in France in 1930. It's a story probably a lot of you know already. Dr. René Maurice Gattefossé began his pioneer research on the therapeutic properties of essential oils, which, by the way, happened because he was a medical doctor and he was doing research, and he accidentally burned his hand, and he had some lavender oil close by. And then he poured when you burn yourself, you just grab whatever you have. So he grabbed that, he poured it on his burn, and immediately he felt the relief, and the burn recovered really fast. And that's when he started researching and studying lavender oil and its therapeutic properties. You can easily Google this. You can easily find this information online. And then back in the 1980s, Dr. Jean-Claude Laplace, whom I've talked about in the first class, I think, was already studying the therapeutic medical uses of essential oils. And then in the US, 1985, that was when Gary first began researching essential oils, which we talked about. He went to Geneva to an essential oil expo, and not an expo, but like a conference. And then he brought back 13 oils, right? If you want to find out what those 13 oils are, you have to tune into YL Drop. Look for the one that Jacob was interviewing Karen Boren, and they will be talking about the 13 essential oils that Gary brought back. Fascinating information, right? I only realized that after Gary, I'm fascinated with history. Okay, so I thought this was very interesting information to share, was that the tomb of King Tut. So King Tutankhamun, and he was the young ruler, young king, because his father died when he was like 9. And however, he only ruled Egypt for 10 years because he died at 19. Fascinating story in the background. You can easily Google that. And when they found King Tut's tomb in 1923 in Egypt, English archaeologist Howard Carter enters the sealed burial chamber of the ancient Egyptian ruler. Everything was intact, and it's 5,000 treasures untouched for more than 3,000 years. Isn't that fascinating? My goodness. And in fact, since then, they have actually taken out a lot of things from the tomb and put it in the museums of in London and all over the world to show. I've been to one of the exhibitions in London. I felt like they were invading people's privacy, because they actually, can you imagine being buried with stuff and then people take out everything from your burial and then display them all over the world? I don't know, maybe it's a personal thing. Anyway, but one of the fascinating thing was, one of the things that were intact were these bottles. And they found that there were a lot of perfume bottles, and the perfume they have already sort of solidified. They're more like an ointment, solid nature. But once you put it between your hand, it will melt. I would say it would be very similar to, our old animal scent ointment. It's very hard, but once you put it in your hand, it sort of softens up and it melts. It's sort of like that. So I did some research. It was very similar to coconut oil. In fact, it's more like an animal fat. They think it was duck fat or goose fat that they put the oil in. And then the scent was resembling valerian and spikenard. And isn't that fascinating? Can you imagine? And they still smell nice after 3,000 years. That's why we always say that our essential oils don't, if you keep them well, they don't expire. If you keep them out of sunlight in dark shaded area in that amber glass, you can use it. However, they do evaporate, especially the citrus oils, which are cold pressed, they will evaporate, and frankincense will evaporate. So the one that has a lighter molecular weight will actually go through that cap of ours and it will evaporate. That is actually why when you smell the cover of the bottle, you can smell the oil because the molecules are actually coming out. Okay. The next one will, yes, and this is the one. Hold on, sorry. This is the one. Okay, and then these were the perfume bottles. You can easily find it, Google it. When the tomb of young pharaoh Tutankhamun was opened, among the luxurious contents found within were various beautifully crafted jars and containers. To the excitement of the excavators, one particular jar was discovered to contain a perfume unguent, still radiantly fragrant after so many centuries. And what they also found was frankincense, myrrh, myrtle, white rosin, and agar wood perfume oils, essential oils. And these perfumes were analyzed in 1926 and were found to be consist of a neutral animal fat and a resin and a balsam. And these were also some of the bottles. I wonder what kind of material this is actually. This looks like I don't know, it looks like resin. It's fascinating. Okay, and this was part of the restoration of the inside of the tomb. This was actually his coffin. Can you imagine? Ooh, okay. And this was actually I only managed to find this in Chinese. So over 2,000 years BC, this manuscript mentioned essential oil and perfume choices and show that in Moses' time, frankincense, myrtle, white rosin, and agar wood spices and essential oils were used as medication to treat illnesses. And that, in fact, it also mentioned that myrrh was used to treat pollen allergy. Is that what you call it? I'm trying to translate here. So this was 2000 BC papyrus. I talk about essential oils, and these are the wall painting, wall crafting. These I don't cave painting. Okay, you know what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's go to man's. So it is man's first medicine. And in fact, modern medication is only, 300 years old. And before that, human already were surviving. So I'm sure there was something that somebody was using. Otherwise, human would have been extinct already. So, and there were also, I'm sure a lot of you have read the Bible, you've studied the Bible. It's, and God provided plants to assist in healing our minds and bodies and spirits. And there were over 200 references of essential oils in the Bible. I grew up studying the Bible too. I went to a Roman Catholic school. And I remember that Jesus would used to put his hand on somebody and then they would like stand up and walk. And I've actually heard stories like this in Young Living when I travel with different Young Living people, or when I'm talking to different people, different members from convention, and they would say that they would anoint the person with our oils and they would pray and then they'd get up and walk away. Like, seriously, it has happened in real life. And I mean, can you do it without the essential oils? Can you just pray? Maybe. Can you use the oils and not pray? Maybe, but if you pray and use the oils, maybe it works better. I don't know. I actually have seen people who couldn't walk and then you put the oil on and he was walking and then he can walk right away. I've tried it too. I've not only tried it with essential oils, I've actually tried it with Chinese herbs. Because growing up in Hong Kong, we have a lot of Chinese doctors, Chinese bone setters. I don't know if you know what bone setters are. Bone setters are, when you've broken bone and he'll put some herbs on you and then he'll wrap you up. And I actually have a bone setter who rumor that he used to work in China in one of those Shaolin monastery, and he was the medical doctor there. So Shaolin monastery is people who do all the kung fu, they jump over. You probably have seen the movies where they like run over walls and jump over stuff and sort of like fly through the air and stuff like that. And they always break their bones, or the joints, they break the joints. And I actually have a Chinese bone setter in Hong Kong, and many times I've brought people and friends over where they couldn't lie on their right side for a long time, and then he just goes to him and go, and then he can walk and stuff like that. And I personally, one time I had a hairline fracture on my foot. I just sprained myself. I fell down, sprained myself. I had a hairline fracture, and I was actually wheeled to him on a chair because I really could not walk. I couldn't even put my foot down onto the floor without it being so painful, so excruciatingly painful. So I was wheeled to him, and he looked at me, and he opened it back. There was this jar of dark liquid, and then he used some cotton pads, and he put the dark liquid, his herbal thing, it smells like an herbal liquid, and he said, "Oh, easy. This is he called it connecting bone water." I think it's helichrysum because the Chinese name sounds like Chinese helichrysum. So he said, "Oh, I have this, don't worry." And then he put it on a patch of cotton, and then he slapped it on the top of my foot. Okay, so on my top of my foot, and then he said, "Okay, go over there and sit down." So I sat there for like maybe 15 minutes, and then he goes, "Okay, start stretching your toe, just move your ankle like this." Because even if I could not put my foot down on the floor, I could move my ankle. So he said, "Move your ankle like that and stretch out the ligament." And I swear, after 30 minutes, I could walk. Of course, with a limp, but I could put my foot down and I could walk back to him, and I could walk back to the car. And it was 30 minutes. And yeah, so I'm not surprised about anything that we've heard that has happened in the Bible. Anyway, so that's the story. And so Mary anointed Jesus' feet with spikenard, and the frankincense and myrrh was brought to Jesus. And so frankincense, gold, and myrrh. This probably was not correct, but anyway, I'm just going to show this. And both of them are resin. Both of them are grown in the Arabian countries. I have this map here. This map was actually taken out from this book, The One Gift. The map is at the end of the book. Oh, where's my map? I don't know where it is. But I took a photo, I scanned this, and the red part is actually the Frankincense Trail. This was actually followed, BBC done a documentary tracing the frankincense that was given to Jesus. And this was the trail that I've drawn in red, okay? And this is where, if you don't know where Jerusalem is, this is where Jerusalem is, and this was the Frankincense Trail. To show where it is, I actually have a map to show you. This is Oman, this is Yemen, through Saudi Arabia. You see these are actually mountains, okay? And then there's the Dead Sea of Israel, and then Jordan, and then Israel. And this was the star, is actually Masada, and this is Egypt, okay? Just to give you an idea of where everything is. And the reason why I put Hunzaland and Lahore here was because Gary actually also went to Hunzaland and Lahore in Pakistan, Hunzaland and Hunza, to look for people who their longevity secrets, because these two places have are famous for having people who live until past 100 years old and still very healthy. So Gary actually went to these two places to look for the secret of longevity. And in Hunzaland, he found it was the apricots that they were growing, because everybody was eating the apricots. It's sort of like the Ningxia berries in Ningxia province, right? So he brought the apricots and he studied them. And that's why we used to have the apricot wolfberry apricot bars, and he also used to put apricot juice in the Ningxia red. Anyway, so So this was where it is, to give you an idea. This is Saudi Arabia, this is Africa, Iran, Afghanistan, India, okay? All right, I didn't know that we were doing history and a geography lesson, but anyway. So in Egypt, so back in 1991, Gary already began traveling throughout Egypt to exploring the pyramids, tombs, and temples and museums, and visiting government offices. He even wandered through marketplaces, looking at all the essential oils, dry herbs, resin burners, and beautiful oil containers to get ideas. The information was voluminous. He felt very comfortable walking back in time as history told its story, opening still another chapter of discovery. His experiences were amazing, and the knowledge he brought home convinced him even more that there was so much that had been lost in the modern world. And so when he was in Egypt, he met Dr. Radwak Farag, whom I talked about in the beginning of this course. He studies essential oil chemistry and its effect on the immune system. You can Google Radwak. Hi, Christina. I miss you. Christina is one of our members in Hong Kong, but he went to Toronto and he went to convention. And Radwak Farag, actually, if you Google him, he is a professor of Department of Biochemistry. He's also the Faculty of Agriculture in Cairo University in Egypt. And this is whom Gary learned from. And look at all these studies published that he has published. The list is very, very long. And so you can Google him and you can look up antimicrobial activity of some Egyptian spice, essential oils, correlation between chemical composition and antibacterial activities of essential oils of some aromatic medicinal plants growing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is in Africa. Antioxidant activities of some spice essential oils on linolenic acid oxidation in aqueous medium. Influence of some spice essential oils on Aspergillus parasiticus growth and production of aflatoxins in synthetic medium. Characteristics of antioxidant and antimicrobial compounds of cinnamon and ginger essential oils. Chemical and biological evaluation of the essential oils of different Melaleuca species. Influence of thyme and clove essential oils on cottonseed oil oxidation. Cardiotonic and antidysthyramyc effects of oleanolic and ursolic acids, methyl mesylate, and euphyl. Anyway, so you get an idea, because I can't tell you what the oils can do, but the studies can, right? Anyway, so Dr. Radwak Farag. Okay, and in Egypt, he traveled through Egypt between the year 1991 to 2018. He found that on the wall carving, that these were actually the cleansing of flesh and blood with essential oils. This was actually, there's a person lying here, and then another person was doing essential oil stuff on him. And this was actually emotional clearing of using the essential oils. And he was in Falai, where he met, this was a fascinating story. Okay, I will read this out from the D. Gary Young blog. Okay, you see that these resins and oils that were held in the hands of the Egyptian on the wall paintings. So I want to read this to you. This was from the D. Gary Young blog. It's fascinating. So the journey to sacred frankincense, part 1. Editor's note: since Gary's passing, we have been taking stock of the tremendous contribution he made to the world by revisiting his presentations, such as this fascinating 7-part blog post series called The Journey to Sacred Frankincense. My journey began 18 years ago when I traveled to Egypt in search of the answers to many questions about the mysterious of essential oils hidden in the ancient ruins and hieroglyphics of Egyptian history. I was excited to study essential oil chemistry with Dr. Radwak Farag, PhD, Dean of the Biochemistry Department of Cairo University, who at that time was the most published authority on essential oils in the world. Tourism had already been greatly restricted in Egypt when I heard the announcement in the London airport requesting that all passengers traveling to Egypt report to the customer service counter of Egypt Air immediately. All non-residents were being advised not to travel there because there were tremendous tension and upheaval in the country, and it was extremely dangerous. Tickets were being changed and refunded for all foreigners except one. I knew I had to go, and I just couldn't let this stand in my way of what I felt was to be a great adventure into the discovery of the unknown. As I boarded the Egypt Air flight to Cairo, all eyes of the 38 Egyptian citizens were on me as I placed my camera bag in the overhead compartment. As the plane lifted off the ground, I had a strange feeling of anticipation, wondering what would happen to this lone American. When the jet landed and came to a stop, the stairs were rowed up to the door, but as I moved towards the exit, the head flight attendant asked me to let all the Egyptian citizens off first. As the last passenger to leave the plane walked down the stairs, I saw why I was detained. A military escort was waiting on the tarmac to go with me to pick up my luggages and take me through immigration, customs, and then into a black car waiting in the taxi lane. The military police drove me to a downtown hotel where I was checked in and told not to leave the premises until my departure 2 weeks later. Part 3. Where's part 2? I don't know where part 2 is, but part 3 is important. As I sat in my hotel room, feeling deeply disappointed, I remembered a message that I had received from my friends Eldon and Nancy Nittle a week earlier when I was in Saskatoon. I think a lot of you know Eldon and Nancy. He was actually also mentioned previously because remember previously when Gary was sending the handwritten labels and gluing them on, and they lived in Texas. And when they arrived in Texas, the labels would come off because of the heat during transportation. And then they would have to guess which is which. And that's the Eldon and Nancy. Okay. And they will come up again. Like I've got photos of in the next lesson of Eldon. Anyway, so I remember a message that I had received from my friends Eldon and Nancy Needle a week earlier when I was in Saskatchewan, Canada, giving an interview to on a television talk show. At the same time, they were in Dallas, Texas, giving a young living meeting in a health food store. Although it was late when I returned to my room after the interview, I quickly called them. When I talked with Nancy on the phone, she told me that after their meeting, a stranger who was in the audience came to her and handed her a piece of paper with a phone number on it. He said he was an Egyptian and hoped that she could reach me before I left for Egypt. He said it would be important for me to have the number when I arrived and for me to please call if I needed any help. Then, without further explanation, he turned and disappeared out the door. I remember that as I hung up the phone, a strange feeling came over me. Was this a new mystery? After all, I was going to Egypt, but how did the stranger know I was going there? It was rather intriguing. I scribbled the number on a piece of paper, stuffed it in my wallet, and then turned to my unpacked suitcase that was waiting for me. I had to hurry and finish packing as my flight left early in the morning. With all that I had to do, I never gave our stranger another thought until now. I pulled my wallet out of my pocket to quickly look through all the little pieces of paper I had accumulated. If the number was for real, this was the moment to find out. To my relief, I found the paper still there and quickly dialed the number. When the voice on the other end said hello, I introduced myself and started to explain my situation. He carefully interrupted and said, "Yes, I have been waiting for your call." He gave me very specific time to go down to the front of the hotel with my things. I was not to speak to anyone, and when a black car pulled up, I was to get in quickly, and then he hung up. I had no idea how or why this was happening and wondered if this was to be my demise. However, my curiosity completely overshadowed any fear that I had, and at the specific time, I went downstairs. No one seemed to pay any attention to me, and as I cautiously walked towards the door, the black car pulled up. The door opened, and I quickly went outside. The man inside the car reached out and took my suitcases and made room for me as I climbed inside. I definitely had an unnerving feeling as I closed the door and the car sped away. A man with the same voice that I had heard on the phone introduced himself to me and said that he had come to help me. He took me to a small shop in Giza Square where I met Khadija, an angelic-looking American lady. She was dressed in her white, flowy gown, and with the sun reflecting off the glass behind her, she looked like an angel who had just come from heaven. She said she had been told about me and my work and wanted to help. She was engaged to the Minister of Antiquities, and said that her fiancé would give me written permission to visit all the places that I wanted to go, which opened up Egypt to me in a way I never dreamed possible. It was one of the most rewarding times of my life in my research and quest to learn about frankincense. Since then, I have returned to Egypt many times and made 15 trips into the Middle East, which includes Yemen and Socotra Island. I asked many questions as I studied the history that kept me following different leads, stories, and legends to so many different places. The desert, the mountains, the ruins, the villages, the old people all gave me clues. Besides what I found in a library, museums, and universities. I thoroughly enjoyed studying biblical archaeology in the Hebrew University and being able to travel and see so many historical sites in Israel. I was so grateful for the time that I was able to spend with Dr. Farag at Cairo University, from whom I learned much about the possibilities of essential oils and the chemical constituents. So, this was fascinating. I can't remember if I have the next page. Oh, I got to tell you about this. I need to go back to this page. This page. This was actually, let me find this in the book, and I will read out the part on the book from the book to you. 297. Okay. So let me read out this book, In Search of Ancient Knowledge. 295, page 295, where I got this photo and these photos. Okay, you don't mind, I read out from the book, right? The Ancient Secrets of Egypt. The more Gary learned, the more he was driven to go to Egypt, to the heart of the ancient world of essential oils. His experiences were amazing, and the knowledge he brought home convinced him even more that there was so much more that had been lost in the modern world. Gary traveled throughout Egypt, exploring the pyramids, tombs, temples, and museums, and visiting government offices. He even wandered through the marketplace looking at all the essential oils. In 1991, during Gary's first trip, he was fortunate to meet Dr. Ravrak Farag, Dean of Biochemistry Department of University of Cairo. As of 2015, he had published nearly 200 research papers. Dr. Farag willingly shared his knowledge with Gary. He was a wealth of information and a wonderful mentor. Gary tells an interesting story when he visited the temple of Isis on the island of Philae. Here, Egypt, island of Philae. Okay. One of the guards came, so this was in quote. This is quoting Gary said, one of the guards came to me and said, I know what you came here to see, and indicated that I should follow him. It was very strange, and I thought the guard just wanted money, so I joined a tour group to get away from him. But the guard was persistent and tapped me on the shoulder a second time and repeated himself. This was the guard, okay? This was the guard. I tried to get away from him by going to different directions, but he came around the corner and met me face to face, and for the third time, he said, come quickly, follow me. I show you what you come to see. By then, I was annoyed, but had also become a bit curious, so I followed him. He had an old metal key to a heavy iron gate that he quickly unlocked, pulled open, and motioned for me to hurry inside. As soon as I went through the gate and started up the stairs, the guard walked in and locked the gate behind him. It was very unnerving, but I didn't feel I should go back, so I followed him up the stairs into another open area on the roof and over to a room with no door. As the guard motioned for me to enter, I could see the sunlight illuminating the hieroglyphics on the wall, showing the ancient ceremony of cleansing of the flesh and the blood using essential oils. So this was the photo, okay? It was a glorious moment of discovery for me that became the foundation for emotional clearing that I have used in my teaching. Dr. Farag was amazed at Gary's experience and translated the idea of ceremony for him. He was fascinated with Gary's interest in essential oils and in the development of growing aromatic plants for distillation. In 1995, Dr. Farag came to Utah as a guest speaker for Young Living's first convention and to see the tiny Young Living operations. He was very helpful and encouraging and remained a friend since that time. So this was the guard. Oops, sorry. So this was the guard who kept following Gary, tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Come quick, follow me. I'll show you what you come to see." Okay. And then this one was he's standing at the doorway of the room where he learned about the long lost Egyptian ritual that was known as the cleansing of the flesh and blood. And this photo in the bottom, it says 2 Egyptian priests standing at the head and foot of a person undergoing the 3-day cleansing ritual that included the use of essential oils. This hieroglyph was found in the temple of Isis in an upper room that is rarely shown to the public. Yeah, so isn't this fascinating? Yes. And so he actually also found in Pakistan an ancient plain essential oil extractor dated back to 350 BC. But, well, that you'll have to get the book to read. Okay, so we finished about this part. I thought it was fascinating to share, right? Oh, yeah, and here, and this is in Israel. That's the part I was talking about. And this was actually a distillation apparatus that Gary found. And it was amazing how his explanation brought to life. All this certainly went into the data bank for his plans to build a distillery. In 1990, Gary traveled to Masada, this one in Israel, where he found the ruins of an ancient distillery that was easy to see in the rock. You see here in the bottom, this is where they collected the oil, right? Okay, and this from the book, this is here. If you don't know anything, then they're just rocks, right? But if you know the history, it's fascinating. Okay, I should go back to this page, actually. Should I keep reading? Well, let me know if you want me to keep reading. You can give me some likes, some hearts and stuff, some response, and then I'll keep reading. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next page. Okay, I don't know. Are you guys still there? 299. All right, so. Okay, I can't actually see the likes from here. I don't know how this works. Anyway, I'll keep reading for a little bit. So, Masada is a high mountain plateau on the west bank of the Dead Sea. And this was also the ancient balm of Gilead, the liquid gold that I was talking about. Gary traveled to the Middle East many times between 1991 and his death in 2018 to learn more about the trees that grow anciently in this region. He also went to Hebrew University and spent his weekends driving through Israel following stories of legends told to Gary by his professors who had become interested in Gary's essential oil research. Driving, stopping, looking, asking questions, and following clues were given to him. He finally found the ancient Ein Gedi distillery in Judai Mountains west of the Dead Sea in 1996. So this, okay? I felt like it's easier for everybody to understand if we have a map. And the heightened his curiosity and gave him a whole new awareness about the balm of Gilead, frankincense and myrrh trees that once grew in Israel until about 1921. The original trees were first brought by camel caravan to Israel as a gift by the Queen of Sheba and given to King Solomon as an offering of peace and a desire to learn from him of his great wisdom. Sadly, as history evolved, the great era of the caravans and the desire for the resin and oils diminished. The distilleries became defunct and no one cared for the trees, eventually leaving them to die out. But for Gary, Ein Gedi was a great discovery. This is Ein Gedi, okay? It's a dried up river. It is also mentioned in the book, The Gift, mentioned multiple times. He could see the fats, the water channels, the apothecary, and the great stone doors that were still in place. His mind was filled with visions of all the activities that took place in this ancient distillery, and he could see it in details as if it were just yesterday when the caravans were delivering the sacks of resin for safekeeping or for the extraction of the oil. In Gary's historical novel, The One Gift, the camel caravans seemed to come to life while carrying the frankincense, myrrh, and balsam resin and oils as they traveled from the heart of the frankincense groves in Arabia to Israel, Egypt, India. and other far areas in the world. The story culminates in Engedi, where the ancient distillery looks down from the hills of Dead Sea and where the oils of the balm of Gilead, known historically as liquid gold, frankincense and myrrh were extracted, and various ointments, salves, and tinctures were made. So this is the photo of Engedi. Okay, and Engedi was an ancient way station and depository where frankincense, myrrh, and balsam were distilled. Many ointments, tinctures, and skin creams were made in the apothecary, guarded behind stone doors. So these are all photos. This is actually Marcella von Harding with Mary. This is the green stone door, still protecting the distillery. And then this is the distillery tub. Okay, and the entranceway of the apothecary. This was taken in 1999. And then the tub was filled with resin and water for the typical but rudimentary method of distilling at that time. Yes, isn't this fascinating? It's crazy. So they actually had to collect the sacred frankincense in Oman, and then they would travel through Yemen. And in Yemen, they also had myrrh, and then they would have to travel through Arabia. This is all mentioned in the One Gift book, so that they can get to Jordan, go through Jordan and to Israel. And this is where all these will be transported either to Egypt or through the Silk Road to China. Okay, it would go through Egypt and go to Europe, or by sea, because this is the Mediterranean Sea, or through the Silk Road to China. It's fascinating information. Okay, so there are more information about balm of Gilead, and then the next page, it's this. So I talked about, because this is actually a story of how he looked for ancient ways for distillation. So I also talked a little bit about Pakistan and Hunza. So Gary wrote this book after he went to Hunza land, and it's called The Longevity Secrets, How the Hunza People Achieve Unsurpassed Longevity Through Diet. Actually, I got this book. I have a copy of this book. I found it on the internet, but I bought it. So, and then also, this is the ancient clay essential oil extractor that dates back to 350 BC, now displayed in the Museum of Taxila, Pakistan. The guard in the museum told Gary there were no distiller, but there was an old type of water purifier made of clay in a glass case at the back of the building. But this obviously was a distillation, you know. This is where you boil the water. This is where you put the aromatic plants. And then this is the tube to cool it down. And this will keep the floral water. And the floral water will come here and the oil will stay inside. Does that make sense? Like if you've been to one of the Young Living distillery plant, you would know. So this was actually in Lahore, Pakistan. And this photo was taken in Hunza land. This is scary. Okay. Fascinating information. So, in search of frankincense, this was the route. This is Oman, this is Yemen, and they would take sacred frankincense and they would travel here. And this is, there's also another way station, which I will talk about a little bit later. This is where they will stop for a bit and get more myrrh and balsam and more frankincense, and then they would travel through here, through the desert to Israel in Egypt, and then they will go through to the Silk Road to China and Asia. Okay? All right. So I drew this map. This circle is where this map is. Okay, you see Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, okay? Somalia, Kenya. So the places where there are little footprints are where Gary went when he went to look for frankincense. I felt it was important to show a map of where he went and what he did so that everybody knew that he did travel through the Middle East, the Arabian countries in search of the true frankincense, especially because there were people who were claiming, there were people in the essential oil industry claiming that they had been there and they were looking for Fariana and they were looking for frankincense, blah, blah, blah. But in fact, it was nearly impossible to go to Yemen at that time and to Egypt. And when he was there, he was the only American. The people that he worked with, he learned from, he was the only American who was there. There was nobody else. learning about all the information. So Salalah, Oman. Later on, actually, the story has currently been moved to Muscat, which is a better international city, better for transporting the oils out. This was the lost city of Ubar, which I will talk about in a little bit, and Yemen, very dangerous place. I will talk about it in a bit. Sana'a. He also went here because the Frankincense Trail went through these areas. And this was Jerusalem. A little bit next to Jerusalem was where Jesus was born, in Bethlehem. Israel, Cairo, he went here. He also traveled to Somalia. Later on, I will talk about it, so that he can actually see the Fariana trees, but it was very dangerous. So he traveled through here. He drove through these areas. And this was Socotra Island. And Ethiopia, he also went through this area, and in Kenya, Nairobi, to look for frankincense. Okay. Oh, I actually have dates here too. Yeah. So he was in Ethiopia and Oman in 1998 and 1995. In 2009, he went to Yemen. In 2013, he went to Somalia. I was a member already in 2011, and I was working closely with him by 2013. So when he came back from Somalia, I actually heard him talk about it. Okay, like he was telling us that I'm going to Somalia next month and stuff like that. So frankincense. Ignore the ABCD. I just found this photo on the internet. So the Frankincense family. Frankincense, the medical name is called Boswellia. There are over 20 species of Boswellia frankincense, and occurring in the dry region spanning from West Africa to Arabia and south of the northeast region of Tanzania. In addition, species have been found in India and Madagascar. Okay, so the very popularly known species are these five: Boswellia sacra, which is our sacred frankincense; Boswellia cateri, which is our regular frankincense in the red-orange bottle; Boswellia fariana, which is from Somalia; Boswellia serrata, which is from India, which we put in our turmeric. What do you call it? Mango turmeric. I can't remember what we call it. Anyway, I'll show the photo later. So Boswellia serrata, which the scientific studies have seemed to show that there are different therapeutic properties. You can look it up. And Boswellia papyrifera. However, Boswellia papyrifera don't seem to have as much therapeutic properties as the rest of the four. However, in the marketplace, 75% of frankincense resin are papyrifera. And in fact, with our layman eye, with no knowledge, just looking at the frankincense and smelling it, we can't really tell the difference. So the interesting thing is, Dr. H.K. Lin, who did his first frankincense and inhibition of the growth of turmeric cells, it was published back in 2011 or 2010, if I remember correctly. And that was the first of the kind of study to be published. And since then, in 2015, you can actually find over 200 scientific studies on Boswellia of these four types. And there were only 3 scientific studies on papyrifera. But since then, until 2019, there are 574 scientific studies on Sacra, Cateri, Fariana, Serrata. And on papyrifera, there are 29. Most of the papyrifera are used as perfumes, okay? So the 3 that we have in Young Living is frankincense, okay? It comes from East Africa and is distilled in La Vida Sevilla in Spain, in the distillery in Spain. I visited that distillery myself. I've seen it. And Boswellia fariana is grown in Somalia and is also distilled in La Vida Sevilla. Our Boswellia sacra, our sacred frankincense, is sold as sacred frankincense. It's grown in Oman and distilled in our own distillery, currently now in Muscat. In the beginning, it was in Salalah, okay? And the reason why it has to be distilled in Sevilla, it is because they have noticed that if they distill in the Middle East or Africa, it tends to, you don't know whether they have switched out your frankincense resin. So what they do is they send it actually by air directly to Sevilla in Spain, so that we can make sure it is what we have, okay? And during this process of writing this presentation, I tried to look up information on different Boswellia tree and what they look like. I failed to do so because I have seen that on the internet, people have used the Kateri tree, the photo that Gary took, and say that it's sacra. And then they have also, like, the information on the internet is so inaccurate. So I am only using the photos that were taken by Gary in this presentation. Well, and these are just different grades. So this is information from the internet. This photo was taken by Gary. This is the Boswellia sacred tree in the Dover region near Salalah. This is the sacred frankincense tree trunk and formation of high quality olea resin. The high quality olea resin is white. And then C is called first grade Hujari olea resin, the second grade, and then the third grade is called Najdi. I don't know how to speak Arabic, so I am, but you get an idea, okay? So there are different grades of resin. This information is important. Hold on a second. Because you see in a moment. Okay, so the lost city of Ubar. Back in 1992, the archaeologists and NASA found the ancient Arab town, once the center of the frankincense trade. It's called Ubar. Okay, and later on in 1992, they found it. 2011, BBC did the Frankincense Trail documentary, following this route of the sacred frankincense that were given to Jesus. So the first one is they started in Oman, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia, and then they went to Saudi Arabia. You can easily look this up through Egypt, and last is Jordan and Israel. Okay, fascinating information. And so, because they have found the lost city of Ubar, they have confirmed that that was the Frankincense Trail. This is important because this is a very important city and a very important part of the frankincense trade. And this was a photo of the lost city of Ubar, how they historically imagined that this is what the city looked like. Okay, and in 1995, Gary and Mary first went to Oman to see the new excavation of archaeological findings of the ancient city of Ubar, about 3 hours north of Salalah. It was from here that, with great fear of the unknown, the ancient caravanners began their treacherous, life-threatening journey through the vast and constantly changing desert of desolation, heat, and wind, from which many never returned. It was exhilarating for Gary to be there because he knew that thousands of sacks of frankincense and myrrh resin had been carried, deposited, exchanged, and distilled here. Okay, let me go back to a little bit of the timeline. In 1983, he went to the Geneva conference and brought back 13 oils. And one of them were frankincense. And he started using the frankincense in his clinic in Mexico, remember? And on, what was his name? George, I think. I can't remember. So he had already been using therapeutic grade frankincense for a while. So he was searching for it, and then they found the lost city of Ubar. And that was when he while walking through an Omani marketplace and see tons of frankincense resin, especially the beautifully priced Hujari, the highest grade of Boswellia sacra, Gary made the statement that one day he would have a distillery in Oman and would produce the frankincense oil treasured in ancient times. It seemed impossible, but the dream was there and the vision was intense. So sacred frankincense essential oils is actually, Gary was the first who brought it to the English-speaking country. Now, of course, you can find it all over the internet, you know, where they're all copycats. So Gary was actually the first person in the English-speaking world to have brought out sacred frankincense to the world from Oman, okay? After exploring many Middle Eastern countries, Gary ultimately did build the distillery in Salalah, Oman, in the center of the frankincense history, close to the harvest of Boswellia sacra resin. The distillery was later moved to Muscat, Oman. Okay, and this is Dr. Suhail. So this was a photo back in 1995. And then, amazingly, back in 2010, Gary built the first distillery and extraction chamber with Dr. Suhail, Mahmoud Suhail, in Salalah, Oman. Today, in 2015, there's 7 extraction chambers for the frankincense. For frankincense, Boswellia sacra, myrrh, and sweet myrrh. Okay, so 5 years later, he managed. So that was very exciting. And I thought this was very interesting information that he found in Kenya, and I'd like to read this from the blog. Frankincense in Kenya and Oman. This was a blog from 2008. Okay, so this was right in the middle. Oh no, I got my dates wrong. So 15 years later, he built the distillery. You know, a lot of people would have given up in 5 years, but no, he kept on. 15 years later, he built it. So 1995 was the first time he went to Oman, to the city of Ubah. Okay, so 1995, 2008. So this was 2 years before the distillery was built. A note from Gary in 2008, December the 4th. Over the past 5 weeks, I have traveled around the world 1.25 times, visiting 11 countries, experienced 36 hours of time zone changes, and took 30 flights to see our oil in production and meet with some of our partners in growing and distilling essential oils. They appreciate my personal visits, and I had the opportunity to spend much time with them. They have great admiration for the mission of Young Living and respect for my 20 years in the industry. Back then, it was already 27 years. A highlight of the recent trips was inspecting frankincense sources. We traveled to Nairobi, Kenya, where I was able to introduce Mark Schroeder and Mary Lou Jacobson to our frankincense suppliers. The final leg of our journey brought us to Oman, home to the famed Frankincense Trail. There, we were privileged to explore the historical ruins and felt blessed to traverse such sacred grounds. Interestingly, some companies claim they are purchasing frankincense harvested in Oman, but they would travel there themselves. They would discover that frankincense is not commercially harvested in Oman, and there were no frankincense distillery currently in operation there. Upon talking with Omani resin brokers, they explained that the resin they export commercially is harvested in Somalia and Ethiopia and then shipped to England for distillation. In the following blog post, Mark Schroeder will recount some of our experience in Nairobi, Kenya, where we were privileged to witness grade 8 frankincense, Boswellia Kateri, being distilled. There, we were able to once again verify the purity of raw materials and the masterful process that produces our Young Living frankincense. There's much more to say, but my first time was short. Please check back often for updates on my travel. Mary and I send love and appreciation to all. Gary Young. So the next one was frankincense. Located in Kenya is a Frankincense Boswellia Kateri distillation operation, which collects resin from the coastal hills of Puntland, a region in northeastern Somalia, and extracts it in the state-of-the-art stainless steel plant near Nairobi, Kenya. The distillery is owned and operated by Dr. Haag and Dr. Osman, a Kenya native and a Somali exile. They have joined together to produce one of the best frankincense essential oil distilleries in the world. Moreover, their passion for natural medicine and frankincense is all aspiration. So to back a little bit, back in 2008, he was already visiting the Frankincense Kateri distillation. And that was also around the same time when he was also working with the distillery in Sofia. Because when we were there, I remember that they also went back, it's a family-owned operation, and they all knew Gary. And so that distillery is the one that we're using now. The resin, let me go back to this, reading this. Gary Young, Mary Lou Jacobson, and I, Mark Schroeder, were recently on hand at the Nairobi facility to watch the steam vessel, loaded with 90 kilos of grade 8 resin frankincense, freshly collected from Puntland tribes people, undergo a 10-hour distillation process. It was eye-opening to witness how different the distillation of frankincense resin is compared to that of traditional herbs such as rosemary and thyme. The resin must have certain moisture content before steam is applied, emphasized Dr. Osman, who has a PhD in chemistry and more than 20 years of experience in the field. This is absolutely crucial in order to produce a top-grade frankincense essential oil. And the resin must be agitated during distillation to ensure uniform steam dispersion and oil extraction. Moreover, the separation of the oil from the floral water is even more challenging. The steam must pass through the series of chillers and receivers to obtain proper oil separation, stated Dr. Hug. If separation is not performed precisely with the correct sequence and temperature, valuable components of the frankincense oil will be lost. I asked Dr. Hug about organic certification for the frankincense essential oil, and she replied that while certification is less than a few months away, this is not a pressing concern. Almost all frankincense resin are wildcrafted and therefore organic. Being organic is the least of our worries. I was surprised to hear this. Raw material variability is always a challenge, Dr. Osman pointed out. And the worst type of variability is adulteration. For example, many frankincense suppliers mix in resin from related species, such as Boswellia papyrifera, and bill the blend as pure Boswellia cauteri. While the Boswellia papyrifera resin is a beautiful amber and translucent, it produces only a small yield of inferior grade oil. Sometimes up to 20% of a sack labeled as Boswellia cauteri resin may be a jumble of dirt, debris, and distantly related species. Fortunately, the Boswellia cauteri resin purchased by Dr. Osman and Dr. Hogg is carefully inspected prior to distillation. They rarely find problems because of their policy of only dealing with trusted tribal sources that have long-standing ties to the community and an impeccable history of well-crafted high-quality raw materials. Dr. Osman avoids buying resins in open markets or bazaars where adulteration with bark, dirt, fillers, and unrelated resins is always a risk. European tourists to Africa and Arabia are easy marks for buying so-called frankincense resins that are actually blends of Boswellia papyrifera and other species. Dr. Osman noted, they obtain these resins from local merchants or peddlers, take them home and show off this as frankincense to their friends. And it is not just tourists who are fooled. Many wholesale buyers for America or Europe buy up inferior grade frankincense essential oils and never know the difference. They have almost no knowledge of gum resin varieties and have never personally inspected the gum resin before it is processed by distillers thousands of miles away. The problem is that frankincense resin is almost never distilled in the country in which it is harvested, such as Somalia, where violence and political instability are rampant. Instead, bags of resin are exported from Bosaso to other locations where they may be mixed and extended before shipped off to anonymous third-party distilleries in Europe and India, who have little interest in guaranteeing raw ingredients integrity. As long as these frankincense essential oil passes an organoleptic review and even gas chromatography analysis, they are labeled as 100% pure Boswellia cauteri frankincense. Unfortunately, I need to move this away. Oh, shoot. Unfortunately, these low-grade frankincense is light years away from true therapeutic-grade frankincense essential oils. So you get an idea, right? I don't need to explain. So for people who actually for companies that get their frankincense from third-party brokers, like the one that I talked about in lesson 2, where I showed everybody online purchases of organic frankincense essential oil easily, those are the oils that you don't know. Like even if you have a GCMS result, it doesn't mean that it is unadulterated, okay? Wow, we're only at slide 27. I think I have like 60 slides. So in 2009, when Gary went there, he found a way station in Oman. The interesting thing here, the reason why I have to mention this, and this is actually a group of young living diamonds. Okay, so let me read this. Part 12, Finding Pure Essential Oils, Frankincense. I have been in Oman 15 times over 15 years. I have built 2 distilleries in Salalah. Well, this was from 2019. This is from 2010. because this was actually taken out from Gary's teachings. I have been in Oman 15 times over 15 years. I have built 2 distilleries in Salalah and have walked from the eastern Dovar Mountains and east of Hasik to the border of Yemen, harvesting frankincense resin, while exploring and conducting research in Oman with my film crew, Don Mirrorhead and John Whetton. We found the legendary Wadi Adu treasury house that was said by the Ministry of Antiquities and the Minister of History and Museum to no longer exist. We were excited to make this great discovery, and you'll be the first people to film it. I have walked the mountains in the Hadramaut in the interior of Yemen, harvested frankincense, brought the resin home and distilled it so that I could know without question what species it is. Yemeni frankincense is similar to the Boswellia sacra, but more closely matches Boswellia qatari. I combed the mountains on Socotra Island from the Hornhill Plateau to the west side shore of Heasia for a particular species of frankincense. I do not make statements without facts, without going to the source to see for myself. But there's a price to pay to get the truth and an even higher price to pay to get pure essential oil. Traveling to these areas and backpacking up, down, and around mountains in difficult terrain challenges even the hardy, which is why there's so much misinformation and untruths written and published in books. Very few individuals are willing to pay the price, since it is easier to copy other people's information, claim someone else's stories as their own, or just make things up when they simply don't know what they're talking about. I met with Salim Al-Ati, Director General, Ministry of Agriculture in Dover. I have also visited with the manager of the Salalah Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In addition, I have visited and become friends with the Sheikh and the entire Dover frankincense region, Sheikh Hamdan, and continue to search and discover new information. Young Living now leases land for farming in Salalah, Oman, now Muscat, Oman, and has a major investment there. It didn't come easy and it didn't happen overnight. I spent months with Mahmoud Sohal, MD, writing papers to apply for an export permit for Boswellia sacra because there had never been one issued before this time. I have done this, though, so that you know that you are getting purest essential oils possible. Stay tuned for an in-depth list of ways you can identify essential oils for yourself without having to pay such a steep price. So in here, interestingly, the reason why I have to quote this is because I wanted to show everybody how amazing and how intuitive Gary and how connected he was, because Gary seemed to have a knowing of a sense about things. And when he was told something did not exist, that it wasn't there, it could not be done, it was just a legend, he became more determined. He had read about Wadi Adu. Let me see. This is page 187. Let me read this out to you. He had read about Wadi Adu, and for the 16 years, every time he returned to Arabia, he looked for the ruins without success. He was told by archaeologists at the Historical Museum that a way station did not exist, but he continued to search in different areas with the feeling that he would find it if he kept looking. In 2009, while exploring the Al-Hasik Mountains, a feeling of tremendous anticipation grew as he climbed upward. He knew there had to be a way station somewhere in the mountains for the caravans traveling through Uba because the distance was so far. Finally, he reached the high plateau. The way station emerged from the rocks, hidden from the view of anyone passing below. This was what I was trying to show you. So Wadi Adu, the ancient way station of the Frankincense Trail, which Gary discovered in 2009, and where the distilling fats are still identifiable. And then this is actually the largest known frankincense tree in the world, estimated to be 800 years old in Salalah. Okay? Isn't this fascinating? And this photo was taken in 2013 in the Diamond Retreat in Fort Sumaram in 2013. So I felt this was very important for everybody in this class or anybody who would be watching this to know the truth about what Gary did and how connected he was in this area. And here in this stone, here in this photo, Gary found the stone with engraving of a flying serpent carved by protectors of the frankincense tree to frightened resin poachers away. This was a very heavy stone and approximately 2,000 years old. And interestingly, I remember that there was one copycat company, and they claimed to have gone to Somalia and found the Feriana and they claimed to have went to Somalia and found the frankincense themselves. And then they made up the story about how when they were in the tree, they actually talked about it at their convention. And when he traveled to there, and when he climbed the tree and tried to get the resin from the tree, there was this snake that was in the tree. And it actually came from the story of the flying serpent that will protect the sacred frankincense tree. But there's actually no serpent and no snake. It's just a legend. It's just a story. Okay. It's quite funny when I heard it. Okay. So building the distillery in 2010. This was the Journey of Sacred Frankincense Part 6, okay? And this was also written by Mary, but it was originally published in 2010 in September. Okay, so he just built the distillery after 15 years of traveling to and from Oman, building relationship with the people there and acquiring their trust. I was able to fulfill a 15-year-old dream to build a distillery in Oman and be the first in hundreds of years to distill sacred frankincense. After months of paperwork and waiting for the country of Oman to write the code, we were finally able to obtain permits to export Boswellia sacra to the United States and Ecuador. For that, we have to thank the wonderful people of Oman and our partner and manager, Mahmoud Suhail, MD, medical doctor. Boswellia acids are some of the main compounds found in frankincense species of sacra and Qatari that science is claiming to be an anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory. Boswellia sacra has the highest amount of boswellic acid at 42%, and Qatari has almost as high an amount with 40%. It is most interesting that Feriana found outside the US shows an extremely low percentage of boswellic acid, ranging from perhaps 2 to 3%. But the Feriana marketed in the US had been analyzed by an independent US laboratory and shown to have virtually no boswellic acid in its chemical structure. In all my travels while filming the documentary, The Frankincense Trail, titled The One Gift, and during the 15 years of research that I used in writing my book, a companion book to the film, which was published in June 2010, also called The One Gift, never did I see other Americans, and certainly no one from Utah, doing research in Oman. This was from the following one, part 7. I met with Sheikh Hamdan, head of the largest corporation in Salalah, with businesses in construction, financing, general trade, etc. The Hamdan Group also owns a private hospital. Sheikh Hamdan and his son, Mr. Abdullah, are very interested in Young Living's frankincense venture in Oman and wants to help. Sheikh Hamdan has worked as an overseer and coordinator of the people who harvest frankincense resin in the Dhofar region. He also confirmed that he has not had any other American or anyone from Utah come to do research, start a new business, or nor investigate the Omani frankincense. When I visited the Ministry of Agriculture, the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Trade, the Ministry of Business, Trade and Export, they confirmed they had never met with any American, nor had an export permit been requested, irrespective of the fact that no codes existed for exploitation of frankincense resin or oil. It is sad that there is so much deception in the world of essential oils. Very few people have had enough experience to know what questions to ask, what to look for, and have paid the price to know the difference between the resin species and to determine which of the 5 different grades they are and their quality. Why must the talk about the sacred oil be married with the negative sides of the essential oil industry that is about money and power? Only those who are part of that deception can answer that question. For me, its name bears that meaning, and I feel blessed and privileged to be in a country of Oman, to be part of bringing God's sacred frankincense to the world. Since March 2010, Young Living has built 2 distilleries, are in operation 6 days a week in Salalah, Oman, and we are preparing to install a 3rd one by 2011. It is noteworthy that the cancer rate in Oman is much lower than other countries in the world. Mahmoud Suhail, MD, our partner in Omani Frankincense Venture, recently shared with me the latest disease statistics for Oman. Out of a population of almost 3 million, the total number of malignancy in Oman 2008 was 1,992, with total deaths 194. The population of the United States is 305 million, and in 2009, there were 1,479,350 cases of cancer, with 562,000 deaths. Dr. Suhao wrote, "This means during 2008, and per every 10,000 population, 7 got cancer in Oman, while 48.5 got cancer in the United States. That's 6.9 times more cancer in the US than in Oman. Because the cancer rate is so low in Oman, there are no oncologist ward in Omani hospital in the Dhofar region." Interestingly enough, the Omani people, unfortunately, have many factors that favor or promote cancer, such as smoking, hyperlipidemia, hypertension, diabetes, low exercise levels, and bad food habits. But they're doing just something right. Could it be that their use of frankincense has had an impact in the prevention of cancer? Some Omanis believe that their cancer-free life is a result of burning frankincense resin and chewing it daily. Boswellia sacra frankincense that was taken to the Christ child, the holy anointing oil, the sacred frankincense, has been found to carry very high, if not the highest, scoterpian levels, highest boswellic acids, highest DRC DNA repair capacity, and highest anti-cancer properties in the world. After 15 years of planning and preparation, this highly priced ancient oil is now available only from Young Living and the world leader essential oils. I'm proud that we have the 2 finest species of frankincense in Young Living, Boswellia sacra and now our new addition, Boswellia sacra. With respect and admiration for those who seek the truth, I offer my best wishes for a day of discovery and learning, a day of truth. Essentially yours, Gary Young. Originally published September 28, 2010. Apparently, since then, it has been 12 years. There are actually other Boswellia sacra company, like other essential oils that are being sold as Boswellia sacra, but indeed, we do not know the purity and the quality of these oils. Okay. Remember Mark Schroeder, the one that wrote the previous, this one. He wrote these 2 parts about Kenya. Okay, he was the one who wrote these. And here I'd like to introduce you to something that Mark wrote on his own Facebook. So this is Mark Schroeder, and he was actually also the one who helped develop our new Ningxia Red. Well, the Ningxia Red that is old now, but it has been new. The Ningxia Red and the Sleek. Okay, the Sleek Essence, the Sleek Shake, and the whole set, Citrus Slim. He helped formulate all of those. So this was taken from him, and this is him on the street side searching about frankincense and reading about it. So Gary had his first encounter with adulterated frankincense in 1997 when a third-party broker assured Gary on a stack of Bibles, or should I say Quran, that his very expensive premium Hajari-grade Luban oil was the best in the world. Okay. Do you guys want to go back to Hajari and the grades of frankincense here? That is why I gave you this information. First grade Hajari, this C, okay? Okay, let's go back to that page. Gary had his first encounter with adulterated frankincense in 1997, when a third-party broker assured Gary on a stack of Bibles, or should I say Quran, that his very expensive premium Hajari-grade Luban oil was the best in the world. At the time, we were working with Jim Kababik at Flora Research, who did our advanced biochemical analysis prior to Gary's multi-year, multi-million dollar build out of his own state-of-the-art Young Living essential oils analysis facilities. When Gary parsed the report, he was stunned. What smelled like frankincense, Boswellia cachari, was in fact extended frankincense, a small amount of real oil dissolved in 98% diethyl phthalate. Remember, Gary's nose was so good that he could smell an oil. This was 1997. He could smell an oil and tell you how many percentage, and he would be spot on, like how many percentage of each compound, and he'd be spot on. Yet he was still fooled by this Arabian frankincense broker. Okay, this incident prompted Gary to be the first to travel to Oman and Yemen to secure genuine frankincense and distill it himself. In this photo from 2010, we're interviewing a major frankincense and myrrh exporter in Yemen to secure a supply of authentic resin for distillation. Young Living is the only company in the world legally permitted to sell and distill sacred frankincense from Oman. This was the information back then, okay? All right, fascinating, right? So you will need to know that this frankincense is actually from Kenya. The Qatari we get is from Kenya, and it is air freight to Portugal, to Spain, in Sevilla, to distill, okay? And this is Oman, and this is where we distill our frankincense. Well, it's now here in Muscat. And Somalia, as the Fariana, is also being flown to Sevilla, okay? Frankincense is being flown to Sevilla. All right. And in 2009, he actually went to Yemen because he wanted to see this part of the Frankincense Trail. And this is the map, and this is the map. I still have all those little footprints. I wanted to show you this part of Yemen, and I wanted to show you why, because I needed to let you know how dangerous it was to travel to Yemen at that time. This is Shabwa. Shabwa is where Gary wanted to go to. This, I Googled it. I can't remember where I found it. And they had been war-torn between the year 2004 to 2011, 2014 until the present. There's still fighting wars. And you can see that the orange part is the presence of Hadramawa. This is the area. It is Al-Qaeda presence. Okay, the orange part is the Al-Qaeda presence. The green part is rebels, Al-Hudai rebels presence. So this big part is Al-Qaeda, okay? And he had to, okay, this says, let me try to, it's tiny. Okay, that's what it says. The map does not necessarily represent the number of supporters claimed by each group. The grievances of Al-Hudi rebels and Southern secessionists are primarily political and local in nature. Thus, the locations are represented in the conflict map are much smaller geographically than those of Al-Qaeda, which operates discreetly in small numbers throughout large portions of the country. Al-Qaeda's location, as shown on this map, are based on where members have been arrested or targeted by government, where training camps have been suspended, and where the group has claimed to operate in their own statements. Okay, so he actually had to go into Shabwa. So he flew into Sana'a, and then he had to drive to Shabwa. Okay, crazy, right? Insane, I tell you, it's crazy. So when he went to, so in 2009, he actually went to Yemen, and he found something, I tell you. Okay, Gary was fascinated by Queen Sheba and the ancient Hadramaut civilization she ruled, which was located in modern-day Yemen and was the center of the land of frankincense through which the caravan passed. Gary was determined to see the remains of this ancient civilization so that he could see and document the different frankincense and myrrh species while traveling the ancient frankincense caravan trail from Oman through Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. In 2009, Gary flew to Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, to continue his research and hopefully obtain permission to travel to Shabwa, a major trade center of the ancient caravan. The Minister of Antiquities was assigned to travel with Gary to help facilitate his needs while traveling in the country. Gary told the minister that he wanted to go to Shabwa. He was very surprised by Gary's request and told him it was impossible because Shabwa was in the middle of a terrorist territory and was very dangerous. However, Gary was determined and insisted that the ministry try to get a permission. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, this was Shabwa. Okay, so he flew to Sana'a. Okay, all right, okay. Letters, conversations, and persistent continued for about 2 weeks, finally resulting in the permit he wanted. After 3 hours of driving from Sana'a, Gary entered Shabwa, the first outsider in 42 years. Ruins of storage vaults, distillation fats, and the Queen's Palace were very identifiable. It was a very glorious experience filled with so many unknowns and much danger, but Gary felt very blessed to be able to see this ancient city. standing in the ancient gateway of Shabwa leading to the taxation way station. Here, Murtree in Yemen. Okay, well, you can obviously always show us this photo and the joke. You can see, you can totally tell from the shoes who is the foreigner. Other than that, you can't actually see. And during those time, I asked him why he had to grow a beard. He said so that he would look the part when he is traveling to Arabia. He wouldn't look so much more like an American because it was dangerous. He had to look like he was one of them, and of course his face was very tan. But you see that his feet gave him away. This actually, recently last week at convention, the museum videos, Mary shown this ancient 3,000-year-old ancient incense burner from Shabwa. It was gifted to Gary by the Minister of Antiquities. I will tell you in the next page. Let me see. I have this somewhere. I will read it. Yes, let me read this part from the book. Okay, so ruins of the storage vaults, distillation vats, and the Queen's Palace was very identifiable. He travels with saga of many dangerous situations, unusual solutions, and determination. Some of Gary's personal experience was so dramatic that he was compelled to write them in his journal that evolved into his historical novel, The One Gift, which depicts life of the camel caravan and the commanders who led them. It was an adventure of intrigue, excitement, romance, tragedy, and portrayal of indomitable perseverance. I wanted to show you why he got the antique. Because he found it, and the Minister of Antiquities asked him to keep it because, let me see. Oh, well, so it was the Minister of Antiquities actually asked him to keep it because he found it. And it's all legal. You will have to read it in the book. So that's actually, I think it's fascinating. You can also look at Mary was holding the real thing. And this was actually how our frankincense resin burner was designed from. He got the idea from that. Okay, this was the recollection of from Mark Schroeder. Okay, this is Mark. The key to frankincense essential oil is not what, but the how. The first time Gary and I visited Yemen and Arabia, Felix, to procure genuine biblical sacred frankincense was in April of 2009. 3 weeks after several Koreans were blown up in a suicide blast in the very location we were to be investigating Hadramaut. Regardless of the risk, Gary insisted that we inspect for ourselves the commercial origin of frankincense in central Yemen. You cannot believe what oil and resin merchants will tell you, he cautioned me. You must verify everything personally. The incentive to mislead is massive. The government was extremely concerned for our safety and would only permit us to enter into this region of the country with an armed convoy. As Americans, we might be targets for local with an axe to grind. Bedouins explained to us the art of sustainably harvesting frankincense. It is a delicate affair, a mutualistic ballroom dance between man and nature. Excess harvesting can permanently damage not only the tree, but impair its reproductive potential. This is the problem in Somalia, where all other companies obtain the resin for distillation except for Young Living. Gary wanted to avoid this issue in Yemen and Oman to honor his stewardship of the earth and its precious vegetation. When someone assured you that the sacred frankincense is authentic, simply ask 2 questions. May I see your sustainably harvested tree? And may I visit the distillation facilities? So these were photos taken from Mark's Facebook. So he also, other than going to Yemen, he also traveled to Somalia because he wanted to see Feriana for himself. And so this map is the same as this area. I've moved it down a little bit so you can see Kenya and Somalia. So one time he flew from Kenya to Somalia, then he flew to this little town and he drove, okay? So this was also taken out from the book. The patch bullet holes in the airplane in which Gary flew to Bosaso. There's still bullet holes in 2013, okay? And he was also guarded and protected by armed guards. And the road was very difficult, and a lot of it was guesswork. And this was his journey. He was flying throughout this area. And this was his boarding pass. Okay, and this was the owner of Juba Airways helped Gary get his visa to Somalia, as well as the domestic flights to Hargeisa and Bosaso, and then his return to Nairobi. So his reservation to prove that he was there. Okay. So Somalia, a trip into the unknown. In August 2013, Gary had become curious about Boswellia feriana, frankincense, because of its historical prominence and all the stories told about it by another essential oil company that had been claiming for 6 years that feriana grew exclusively in Oman. Having spent so much time in Oman, Gary knew that Boswellia feriana did not and never had grown in the geographic area of Oman. The Attica company was unknown to any official in Oman, and its claims were upsetting to his Majesty of the Sultan of Oman. So Gary decided to distill feriana resin to analyze the compounds in the oil and determine possible uses. The compounds found supporting the ancient aromatic use as a perfume, which is carried into the present time. The feriana resin is also softer than Qatari and Sacra, making it more desirable for chewing, which is very common in the Arabian countries. Boswellia feriana essential oil is an interesting comparison to the oil of Boswellia Qatari from Somalia and Boswellia Sacra from Oman. Gary was very curious, and since he was considering putting feriana frankincense essential oil into the Young Living inventory, he was more determined to see the trees for himself. There was so much mystery associated with this oil, and the information seemed to come from one person writing about what another person wrote. Gary wanted to see and know the truth for himself. He'd been trying for 8 years to go to Somalia and had flown to Nairobi several times, expecting to go to the tree, but there was always a roadblock. Too dangerous, terrorist attacks, uprising, state of anarchy, chaos, turmoil, kidnapping risk, too difficult to get to the trees, or just too far away. So the stories came and went. In October 2013, while giving Young Living presentation in Dallas, Texas, Gary met a former U.S. Special Forces military officer who said he personally knew the president of the largest clan in Somalia, who he knew would help, opening up a new opportunity for Gary to make that journey. A week later, Gary flew to Nairobi, where he was met by the clan president, who was currently living in Nairobi. He helped Gary pass quickly through Nairobi immigration and customs, where an unknown adventure was about to begin. The clan president was very helpful and answered many of my questions as he drove me to the hotel. The next morning, he took me to meet the president of Juba Airways, who was born in Somalia, and said he could help me with my travels in his country. When I told him what I wanted to do, they said it might take a few days to get the visa for Somalia. But I said that it didn't matter to me if indeed I really would be able to fly there. I had made it this far, so I wasn't going to turn back and would wait as long as it took. But to my surprise, they called that evening and said they would be able to get my visa the next day. The night seemed long, but when morning came, we drove to the immigration office. With my passport stamped, the president drove me to the airport and said there would be someone waiting for me when I arrived. When I boarded, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety, which seemed to stifle my breathing for a moment. But with little self-talk, I was able to calm down. And an hour and a half later, we landed in Mogadishu, the capital. I sat quietly on the plane while the cleaning crew prepared for the next flight to Hargeisa, also spelled Hargeisa. Some minutes later, an airport security officer boarded the plane, and when he saw me, he stared at me with a very angry look. He made a call on his radio and speaking in English and said there was one American on the flight. I was uneasy and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, realizing that I had no place to which I could retreat for a defensive position. I felt very vulnerable and started asking myself what I was doing there. I turned my head to look out the window, wanting to deflect his energy. As soon as he left the plane, the other passengers started boarding, and we were soon in the air again. The flight to Hargeisa was about 2 hours, sitting in not the greatest comfort. I wanted to show you the map. So you're looking at this map, okay? This is Hargeisa. Turn my head, when I got 2 hours sitting in not the greatest comfort, but I was getting closer to my goal. When I got off the plane, two Java Airways employees were waiting for me and quickly walked me through customs, then helped me change some money so that I could go to the market to buy some frankincense resin and get back to the hotel before dark. They said they would be back at 8 a.m. to pick me up. However, my departure was delayed for a couple of times, so the driver didn't pick me up until 1 p.m. I was sitting in the VIP lounge at the airport waiting to board when a security officer came through and asked to see my visa. He rejected the one to Hargeisa and said I had to have a separate visa for Bosaso. I didn't know I needed two different visas for the same country. Feeling dejected, I walked back to the waiting room, wondering what I should do. To my amazement, the same employees who had helped me get this far came to my rescue. They led me through a side door out to the plane and told me just to get on board. I was a bit shocked when I saw the plane with several bullet holes in the fuselage that had been parked with black caulking compound that looked relatively fresh. This plane definitely belonged in a boneyard. It wasn't even good enough for a museum. When the flight crew lowered the stairs, they fell off and hit the ground. I wanted to laugh as I helped them reposition the stairs. As I entered the plane, I knew I had made a mistake. I really began to question my senses and wondered why I was doing this to myself. The inside of the plane was far worse than the appearance than the outside. Was a simple grove of trees really worth the price I was paying? If I died, would this information really mean anything to anyone? How would Mary and the boys feel? I felt my stomach come up in my throat and thought I was going to lose my almost digested breakfast all over the plane. I took a deep breath to calm myself. The pilot came and started the engines, and the plane shook it like it had tremors as it taxied to the runway. As the plane took off, all my thoughts went to my home and family. I felt I was drowning in overwhelming emotions as hot tears moistened my cheeks. I began mentally talking to myself and thanking God for my protection and that of my family so far away. Gradually, a feeling of peace and calming came over me. As we started to descend into the emptiness of the desert of the remote port city of Bosaso, I again began to question the purpose of coming to Somalia. I felt relieved as the wheels touched down, skidding through the dirt and creating a huge dust storm, but I didn't care. I was on the ground. I could feel the tension and oppression in the air with soldiers everywhere. I knew there were only 2 flights a week out of here, which made me feel trapped like being held hostage. I was greeted very kindly by a gentleman who spoke perfect English, which didn't seem to fit in with the culture. But nevertheless, I was grateful. He escorted me outside where the 3 vans were waiting with soldiers who were there to guard and protect me. It was a strange feeling, making me wonder if something unusual was going to happen. I was taken to the enclosed compound that was locked down at night. I slept on a mattress on cold concrete equal to the cold water. But I was not one to complain. I surmised they were really just trying to take good care of me. He told me that I was the first foreigner in a very long time to come there, and that everyone knew about the high-profile American who had just arrived. This gentleman was the president of a smaller clan of native people, but they were the ones who lived near the groves and harvested the resins. When I told him that I had come to see the frankincense trees and collect some resin to take home for research and identification, he quickly told me that he could get resin for me, but it was impossible to go to the groves. The groves are 400 kilometers inland to the mountains. The dirt roads were horrible, and some places were completely washed out, and travel would take several hours to extreme risk. I told him that I didn't come this far not to see the trees, and if the vehicles could go there, the time and risk were not a deterrent. Seeing my determination, he reluctantly agreed, but said we had to leave in the middle of the night so that no one would see us. For some reason, he said we would have to wait a day or so to get everything ready. So I spent the waiting time walking through the market, buying resins, and watching the women clean and separate frankincense tears by size and color of quality grading. Boswellia Cateri has 3 grades, but Boswellia Flaviana have 5 grades, since it comes in much larger pieces of resin. The lady who interpreted for me told me that the women who had been doing the cleaning for the many years looked healthier and happier than those in the village who just worked at the shops. It was most interesting. I brought pencils and notebooks for children in one of the local schools that I asked to visit. The school was dilapidated and had little to offer. My meager gifts seemed like such a small token, but they were so happy and grateful. It was pitch black when we left in the middle of the night. It seemed eerie as we drove in silence down this very bumpy road. while the driver constantly looked for road signs along the way that were obscured and many places completely washed out. After a miserable 10 hours, we could see the village on the horizon with the light of the dawn. So these are photos in the book. Okay, the village people greeted us with big fanfare, welcoming the first foreigners they had ever seen. They were kind and loving and offered what little refreshment they had. I enjoyed our short visit, but I was anxious to get to the trees. I've been telling everyone why I had developed my frankincense chewing gum, and here I was at the home of Boswellia freriana trees. It seems that everyone I met since landing in Bosaso was chewing gum, frankincense gum. It was most fascinating and confirmed some of my feelings about the resin. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys know that the slick gum is actually made with frankincense resin, so it's really good for your teeth. The groves were 5 to 6 kilometers beyond the village, and I didn't want to wait any longer. We drove up 300-yard wide wadi, which is a dry riverbed, where Boswellia cherry trees were growing on the rocky side hills, and I gathered little resin from the trees that had been cut earlier. I was almost surprised to see Commiphora gilindensis, the balm of Gilead, growing right next to the frankincense. So this was this adventure, and there are photos of frankincense tree in the book. So I thought that was very interesting. So, and these were the frankincense tree, okay? And these were the people. This was the little village, and this was the villagers, the little village, and this was he was giving out books to the students, okay? And they also found the sweetmeat tree. Oh, I have to talk about the island of Socotra. So in 2013, he went to Somalia. These were photos taken and from the book. And then after this trip to Somalia, he went to Socotra Island. Oh no, the dates are a little bit off. So he also, at one of these trips, he went to Socotra Island in 2012, and they found 7 rare species of Boswellia, of the frankincense species. Currently, you cannot travel to Socotra Island anymore because of how dangerous it is. So these were taken from Mark Schroeder's Facebook page. Gary was passionate to the point of obsession about seeking out authentic oils, natural, pure, wildcrafted, and unreconstructed. Nature's gifts as its purest form. He was truly the quintessential medicinal pioneer. Frankincense is an oil that is almost universally adulterated, and Gary made it a mission to source his own frankincense. I was blessed to join Gary in the search for not just Boswellia sacra, but also rare species of frankincense that grew exclusively on a small island between the coasts of Somalia and Yemen. Unfortunately, this ill-chosen location is situated in a swatch of ocean which has reputation for some decidedly unfriendly seafarer folks. We had to hire several local guides and boating crew. We saw some colorful scenery along the way, including mementos of previously unlucky island visitors, like this one. And so what they found in Socotra Island was Boswellia bullata and Boswellia popoviana. So when Gary Young heard the reports of legendary healing properties of the extremely rare Boswellia bullata, Boswellia popoviana, he took me on an exploration into the deep plateaus located in the mountains valley of Socotra, an island less than 100 miles from the Somalia coast. These exotic cousins of frankincense were said to have mythological restoration and regenerative properties, both from the leaves and the resin. The shore of the island was littered with shipwrecks, and I am not sure why. We finally arrived at the Howe Mountain Plateau, where Gary and I gathered samples for further studies. It was unfortunate our driver broke down in the middle of the excursion and was subject to sizable concern, the risk of extended unexpected stay in that rugged area. 2012 was the year, and we did not gather enough to distill, only enough to biochemically analyze. Yeah, so these photos were taken actually from Socotra Island. Yes. So between, let me see. Let's see. Yes, okay. So over 26 years between 1992 and 2018, he tracked over 10 Arabian countries. Other than the frankincense oil that we talked about, he also brought us the One Gift book. Okay, I highly, highly recommend all of you to buy this book. Today begins a series of excerpts from D. Gary Young's novel, The One Gift. I'm not going to read this part. I just want everybody to get the book so that you can read it yourself, because it's something that I love. I love reading it before bed because it really helps me think of the kind of person that Gary was. Really, really help us connect with the core of Young Living. And also this other book, Shutron. So these two books here, this is Shutron, Ancient Apothecary. He talked about the different oils that Shutron use. And they have rich and ancient history tracing back to the Sanskrit scrolls, the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the Bible. Okay, and then obviously the Shutron line. I love the smell. You can actually also, women can also use it as a perfume. Not only guys can use it as a my cat is coughing. Low key. And I don't know if you can hear him. He's like super loud. I love the smell of Shutron. And Gary used to say that joke that the smell of Shutron will really, really attract your partner, your wife, and, you know, get some action going. Yes, and also the documentary, The One Gift, where he brought a lot of different members and recorded this documentary. There's stories about it. John Wetton talked about some of the stories, recording it, renting. This was in Petra. He was adamant about doing this documentary. They showed a bit of it from Dr. Ollie's, online symposium in 2022, like this year. There was a part where they showed a bit of the Frankincense Trail, the One Gift documentary. And some of our members, this is Ben Howden, Carol Howden, Jill Young, a lot of the members went together and experienced this with him. And also, he actually also wanted to do a peace caravan. If you were in Young Living back then, you might have remember it, the World Peace Caravan. He wanted to create this World Caravan. 3 separate times, D. Gary Young dreamed of leading a caravan of camels through the desert. The camels, written by people from all faiths, came from every direction and merged into one united stream. After the third dream, so vivid it was almost jarring, Gary decided to tell his wife, Mary, and the 2 closest friends about, and their responses were, "You must do this." So unfortunately, there was so much war in that area that eventually we have to call it off. But I've got information here. This was from the Essential Edge News from 2015 in January. You can find it online on issue.com under the Young Living account. This is the date, 2015 January. You can read more about it. And I also found in the same year, in May, Gary actually found this Children of the Earth to collaborate with the World Peace Caravan. And he was going to get people from all different walks of life, different faiths, and different nationality to unite together and require and request world peace for just that week. Unfortunately, it was very dangerous and it never came into fruition. So originally, he wanted to start at Wadi Musa. And this was where Jordan Petra is, and walked the caravan until here. Through this Ein Bolkek, okay? Luckily, he designed 2 oils, Sacred Angel and Journey On, for this peace caravan. Journey On eventually only was sold after Gary passed. So these 2 oils are actually from the peace caravan. And he actually auctioned out some of the initial oils. And also the Arabian distillery, these were taken out from the book. And this handwritten instruction was written by Gary 2010 in March. The instruction on how to distill. Now it is framed and put on the wall of a distillery in Muscat. Now there are 17 extraction chambers. And he wrote that first you have to immerse the frankincense resin in water and agitate it, and then distill it for 100 degrees at 100 degrees Celsius for 12 hours. And 15,000 reapers in groups of 10 to 30 are responsible for hand harvesting our sacred frankincense, myrrh, and sweet myrrh for Young Living. Each boswellia tree can only be harvested once a year, so it must be carefully supervised. I was reading about sacred frankincense and harvesting, and apparently the people that are not our reapers, a lot of the outside reapers, they actually go and harvest the tree more than once a year. It will actually eventually kill the trees because they're not controlled. So that is what a lot of the commercial merchants, the brokers, are doing, because it's all about money, right? But in Young Living, we make sure that our trees are only harvested once a year. And in December 2016, our distillery was moved from Salalah to Muscat. Okay, these are all photos taken from the book. And these are the 5 products that we get from this area. Biblical sweet myrrh, we have only got it once. I don't think they sell it anymore. And as I was telling you, that I was trying to research the photos of the trees, of the different species of sacred frankincense, of different species of the Boswellia frankincense tree. The information that I found on the internet was very inaccurate. So I'm only referring to this book. And you can see a lot of people ask to compare the 3 different species that we sell. This is the GC analysis of sacred frankincense. This was the analysis of Qatari, the frankincense. And this is the analysis of the Fariana. You can obviously, that Fariana is very different. So it's used for a different use. People use it as a fragrance. It's also actually really good for joints. But this too, you can see that it's very similar with the sacred frankincense having more compounds, okay? The boswellic acid, okay? More of the boswellic acid. Okay, and just comparing frankincense, I found this in one of the presentation back in the convention in 2013 by, if I remember correctly, it was by Dr. Hervé Casabianca. So they were comparing the frankincense essential oil from different companies. Okay, Young Living frankincense, the minimum tugen is 0, and then maximum is 18%, okay? This is the requirement. So company A, they tested it. It falls within, okay? But it is most likely, they call it frankincense, but it's most likely Qatari from India, because they actually, okay, on the label, company B on the label, they say it's Boswellia Qatari from India, but Qatari do not grow in India. Only Sarata grow in India, and it's high tugen. So likely it's actually Sarata, okay? So when you buy a bottle of frankincense, they actually don't, they tell you at the back of the label what it is, but it could not be sometimes. So label company C, oh, sorry. This was ours. No, hold on, pause. I think this is, no. Company B, it's actually more likely Sarata, although the label says Qatari. Company C, here, this one, the label says Qatari, optical rotation positive instead of negative is likely Sarata also. Here, this is the optical rotation. If I remember correctly, optical rotation is sort of like the right hand and the left hand. So it's like synthetic and natural. Company D, this one, the label says Fariana, high penine, low liminin, likely Qatari. Company E here, Boswellia Qatari, label says Qatari, but most likely it's Papyrifera. Company F, label says Qatari, but it's most likely also Papyrifera. So if you do not test them, and if you do not know how to read them, and the GCMS do not know how to interpret the results, there's no way you would know what species it is if you buy a regular bottle of frankincense in the commercial market, okay? So we were talking about Sarata also, right? Because Sarata is actually very well known in India. It is used in our golden turmeric product. Boswellia serrata is a plant that produces in India frankincense. It is also known as Indian albanum. And the plant is native to much of India and Punjab area that extends into Pakistan. And this is what it looks like. And you see that we use it in our serrata, in our golden turmeric. So that actually is all that I'm going to be talking about. It's exactly 2 hours. There's so much information. I hope you can, if you have any questions, you can ask in in the comments. Next week, we're going to be talking about winter harvest. So if you have any questions, you can ask in the comments and I'll come back and reply. I hope this is not too much information for all of you. It is a lot of information for me. I hope it was well presented. And if you need, you can always replay. Please share this with your team. Please share this with the people that you know who are in Young Living, who love to find out more about frankincense. I think there's so much knowledge in it. And I hope you enjoyed today's class. And I will see you next week. Okay, bye.